Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. A hill that once rang with the coughs of the sick, a long stone building crowned by empty windows, and a driveway that no longer remembers the wheels that rolled away. The night wraps itself around the place like a blanket, heavy, cold, and unwilling to be lifted. You step through a rusted gate and the air changes. It's not just colder, it's older. It carries weight. It carries stories. It carries the last breath of people who never went home. Before we go deeper, do this now. Hit like, smash subscribe, and drop a comment saying, Night Crew, your country, time, or Safe Hours, your country, time. I'll be reading every comment and pinning the best ones. If you don't comment in the first 30 seconds, you'll miss the pinned replies. And trust me, the pinned replies turn into community legends. So like it, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Do it now. Good. Now breathe. Because once you're inside tonight, there's no easy way back to the daylight version of yourself. Kentucky hides its own kind of darkness. Here, among the hollers and coal towns and old river cities, stand long, lonely sanatoriums and psychiatric wings, places that were meant to heal, but instead swallowed lives. And the one name you already know, the one you probably looked up to click this video, is Waverly Hills. We're saving Waverly for the end. Wait for number 1. You'll understand why. This is a long watch, built to keep you with me. I want you to put headphones on, turn the lights down, and if you're brave enough, tell me in the comments right now. I'm watching at time, in place, Night Crew, or Safe Hours. I'll pin the best Night Crew entries. If you love haunted history, subscribe and let this channel be your midnight map. Tonight we count down the 15 most haunted hospitals in Kentucky. Each entry is a story. A person, a ward, a rumor, a scream. Some are abandoned, rotting into the earth. Some still care for the living, their ghosts walking the same halls as nurses and patients. All are heavy with memory. Stay with me. The number 1 hospital will shock you, and the journey there will make you unable to skip ahead. When most people think of Kentucky, they picture rolling blue hills, bourbon rows, and old brick main streets. But beneath that familiar map, there's another geography. One carved by illness, isolation, and the long, slow machinery of public health. For decades, Kentucky was dotted with sanatoriums and psychiatric wings. Coal towns and river towns filled hospital beds with miners, factory workers, and families struck by epidemics. The architecture you see now, long wings, wide porches, separate pavilions, was meant for care. In practice, it became a geography of containment. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, tuberculosis was a national terror. Sanatoriums were built on hillsides and away from cities because doctors believed fresh air and separation could slow the disease. Families were told hope existed, and they left loved ones behind for months, years, sometimes forever. The mentality that created these treatment centers also created their ghosts. Isolation, repeated death, and the pain of people who watched others vanish without a funeral. Those memories don't evaporate. They soak into plaster, wood, and the soil of the grounds. Mental health institutions tell a parallel story. Kentucky, like every state, experimented with treatments and systems that now look cruel. Overcrowding, underfunding, long restraining policies, and experimental therapies were common in the decades before modern reforms. People who entered often lacked advocates. Their names were shortened to files and numbers. When the doors closed on wings or whole hospitals were shuttered, they left behind not just buildings but entire communities of memory. The halls stayed. The records stayed. The feelings of abandonment, the unanswered cries, those stayed too. Industry and accident wrote another chapter. Coal shafts collapsed, mills failed, and into hospital wards poured men who would not go home. Emergency wings that once pulsed with life became rooms of repeated sorrow. Rural counties built small hospitals that over time became overwhelmed. The compounding of disease, injury, and neglect created concentrated places of trauma, the kind of concentrated energy that, in ghost lore, becomes a beacon. Kentucky's hospitals are also bound to the landscape of the South. Family ties stretched thin by migration, poverty that meant delayed care, and communities that quietly buried their dead in local plots. In many cases, unmarked graves and hastily arranged pauper burials exist near the old sanatoriums. People walk past them without seeing the names they carry because sometimes there are no names, only numbers and dates. That fact alone fuels storytelling. If a place holds the forgotten, it is fertile ground for whispers. So tonight, when we move through this countdown, remember why these hospitals are different. They aren't haunted merely because they're old. They're haunted because of what happened inside. The slow deaths from disease, the experiments that left minds fractured, the locked wards and the families who never returned. They're haunted because whole wings learn to be quiet in the presence of the dying. Before we begin the list, write in the comments your guess. Which hospital do you think will be the scariest? Type a number from 1 to 15. The first person to guess the true number 1 gets pinned. We'll start at number 15 and move down to number 1, saving Waverly Hills for the finale. Each hospital we cover will be told as a story, a slice of history, a first-hand account or two, and a spine-tingling moment that makes you consider arriving at a night shift with nothing but a flashlight. I wrote this video to hold you, to build tension, not to sprint. So keep your headphones on. Quick check-in. If you're watching at night, type night crew now. If it's daytime, type safe hours. Put your country and the local time after it. For example, night crew, USA, 1:14 a.m. I'll be reading and pinning the most chilling replies. Coming next, number 15, the hospital that begins our descent into Kentucky's darkest wards. If you thought Kentucky's haunted history was all Waverly Hills and myths, wait until you hear the places we've kept off most lists. Are you ready? Let's step into the first ward. Number 15, Ashland Tuberculosis Hospital, Ashland, Kentucky. High on a ridge overlooking the Ohio River, hidden behind trees that claw at broken windows, stands what little remains of the Ashland Tuberculosis Hospital. Opened in the 1940s, this place was once considered a refuge. Sunlight, fresh air, and isolation were thought to be the only cure for TB. But for many, walking through these doors meant they'd never walk out again. The halls here are unnervingly still. Paint peels in long strips from the ceilings, and the faint smell of mildew mixes with something metallic, almost like dried blood that never washed away. Locals say that if you step inside at night, you'll hear the echo of coughing, not just one cough, but a chorus of it, as if the walls themselves remember the sound of patients gasping for air. One story tells of a nurse who worked the night shift alone. She was checking on a row of patients when she heard footsteps behind her, slow, deliberate, pacing her. She turned, but the hall was empty. The sound didn't stop. Instead, it moved closer and closer until she felt a cold breath graze the back of her neck. They say she left the hospital that night and never returned. Ashland residents whisper about shadow figures moving from window to window, sometimes peering out, sometimes vanishing when headlights from a passing car sweep across the glass. Paranormal teams who dared to investigate reported sudden drops in temperature, phantom knocks, and even voices captured on EVP that whispered a single word: stay. Would you stay inside this hospital for one night if it meant winning $1,000? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments. Ashland TB Hospital marks the beginning of our descent. It's just the first step. And yet, already, you can feel the heaviness of Kentucky's forgotten wards. If this is what we find at number 15, what horrors wait further down this list? Stay with me. Coming up next, number 14, a psychiatric hospital whose stories of screams and apparitions will make you question what treatment really meant in the past. Not far from the bustle of Louisville lies Central State Hospital, once one of Kentucky's largest psychiatric institutions. Opened in the late 1800s, it was originally known as the Central Kentucky Lunatic Asylum. Even the name tells you what kind of place it was: a warehouse for the unwanted, the mentally ill, and those society deemed too inconvenient to deal with. The conditions were brutal. Overcrowding meant patients slept in rows on the floor. Restraints and experimental treatments were common. Whispers of abuse, neglect, and quiet deaths spread through the city. But for decades, nothing changed. Thousands passed through these gates, and countless never came out. Step inside today, and the energy hits you immediately. Locals claim the walls here carry a charge, like the hum of electricity, even in the dead of night. Paranormal investigators report disembodied screams echoing through the abandoned wings, sudden slamming doors, and shadow figures darting just out of sight. One chilling story comes from a security guard who patrolled the grounds after it closed. He said he heard the sound of someone sobbing, soft, broken cries, coming from the locked isolation cells. He tried every key he had, but none opened the door. And still, the sobbing went on. When he called out, the crying stopped. But a laugh, low, guttural, and wrong, answered back. He quit the very next day. Those who venture near at night say figures in hospital gowns still wander the halls. Some stand silently at windows, watching. Others vanish as soon as you approach. But the screams, those are what people talk about the most. They rise suddenly, without warning, sharp enough to slice through the stillness of the night. Be honest. If you heard screaming in an abandoned hospital, would you run toward it to investigate, or run as fast as you could out the door? Type investigate or run in the comments. Central State is a reminder that not all hospitals were places of healing. Some were cages, and the echoes of those cages still rattle tonight. Coming up, number 13, a county hospital where locals swear the spirits of patients still call out from the graveyard right next door. Number 13, Eastern Kentucky County Hospital, Pikeville, Kentucky. Tucked deep in the Appalachian Hills, Pikeville once had a small but busy facility known as the Eastern Kentucky County Hospital. It wasn't the massive size of a sanatorium or asylum, but what it lacked in scale, it made up for in intensity. This hospital served coal miners, their families, and the poorest of the poor. With accidents in the mines happening constantly, its halls saw endless suffering. Old-timers still say the building carried an oppressive weight even when it was open. Long, narrow corridors, the sharp chemical smell, and a basement where the lights seemed to flicker for no reason. Patients swore they heard whispers in the night, voices that didn't belong to the living. Some described the sensation of someone sitting at the foot of their bed, pressing down, even though no one was there. And then there's the cemetery. Just behind the hospital lies a plot of ground where unclaimed bodies were buried. No markers, no names, only shallow graves for those who died without family or money. Today, visitors claim that's where the real activity is. Phantom cries rise from the earth on quiet nights, and cold gusts sweep over anyone daring enough to step onto the ground after dark. Some locals say you can see shadowy figures moving among the graves, figures that vanish if you try to follow. One chilling tale tells of a nurse who worked the night shift in the 1970s. She was taking supplies to the basement when she heard a man's voice calling her name, low, urgent, almost pleading. She turned the corner, and no one was there. But the voice kept calling, closer and closer, until it was right beside her ear. She dropped everything and sprinted upstairs, and refused to ever go back down. Would you dare to explore a hospital graveyard at midnight? Type yes if you're brave enough, or no way if you wouldn't even step foot near it. The Eastern Kentucky County Hospital is mostly gone now, but the ground still breathes. Some say the land itself is cursed, that as long as the unmarked graves remain, the restless will never be quiet. Coming up, number 12, a hospital wing where the living and the dead seem to share the same space, even today. Number 12, Hazelwood Sanatorium, Louisville, Kentucky. Before Waverly Hills rose to infamy, there was another name whispered in hushed tones around Louisville, Hazelwood Sanatorium. Built in the early 1900s to treat tuberculosis, Hazelwood became one of the city's busiest TB hospitals. Families would send their loved ones here with hope, but too often those loved ones never returned. The building itself sat on sprawling grounds, with long, airy porches designed to give patients fresh air and sunlight. Doctors believed that rest and open air could cure the disease, but in reality, Hazelwood became a place of slow decline. Hundreds died within its walls, and those deaths left an imprint that still lingers. Visitors say the atmosphere around Hazelwood is suffocating. Even before the last sections of the hospital were demolished, paranormal investigators reported intense cold spots, the sound of phantom coughing, and doors slamming when no one else was in the building. Some even claimed to see full apparitions of patients wandering the grounds. Pale, thin figures in outdated hospital gowns, One of the most chilling stories comes from a former maintenance worker. He was repairing a light fixture late one evening when he heard a woman humming softly behind him. He turned, but the hall was empty. The humming grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was right beside his ear. He dropped his tools and ran, refusing to return to that wing alone. Neighbors say the land itself is unsettled. People driving past report strange lights in the windows, even after the hospital closed. A few even swear they saw shadowy forms standing on the old porches, watching silently as cars went by. If you were driving past an abandoned hospital at night and saw a figure in the window, would you stop to investigate or keep driving? Comment, stop, or drive below. Hazelwood may be gone, but its legend lives on. It set the stage for Waverly Hills, and some even believe that Hazelwood's spirits moved with the patients who were transferred there, which means its ghosts never really left. Coming up, number 11, a former infirmary where whispers of restless soldiers still echo through the night. Central State Hospital, Louisville, Kentucky. If you thought Hazelwood Sanatorium was unsettling, wait until you hear what unfolded just a few miles away in Louisville. Central State Hospital, originally opened in the late 1800s as the Central Kentucky Lunatic Asylum. This massive institution quickly became infamous for its overcrowding, underfunding, and horrifying patient conditions. Thousands were confined here, some with genuine mental illnesses, others simply cast aside by society, abandoned by families who never returned. Imagine walking its endless hallways at night. Rusted doors hang open like broken jaws, and peeling paint flakes from the walls like dead skin. Nurses once whispered about screams that echoed from locked wards, even when the rooms were empty. Visitors today claim to hear the same things. Faint cries, disembodied voices begging for help, and the heavy footsteps of unseen orderlies making their rounds. Ghost hunters who've investigated the hospital say shadow figures dart across hallways, doors slam shut on their own. And in the basement, where the most violent patients were once chained, there is an oppressive presence so strong it makes cameras glitch and batteries drain instantly. Locals believe many spirits remain trapped here, reliving the torment of their confinement. Some even say the most terrifying part isn't what you see, but the feeling of being watched, as if the patients never truly left. If you had to spend just one night inside Central State Hospital, would you do it? Type yes if you're brave enough, or nope if just the thought makes your skin crawl. Let's see how fearless you really are. Number 10. Pewee Valley Sanitarium, Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Tucked away in Oldham County lies one of Kentucky's eeriest forgotten institutions, the Pewee Valley Sanitarium. Unlike the massive asylums in Louisville, this facility was smaller, but its reputation was no less chilling. Built in the early 1900s, it served as both a tuberculosis ward and later a psychiatric care center, a dual purpose that gave it layers of suffering and death. The building has long since been abandoned, but its legends are very much alive. Locals whisper about strange blue lights flickering in the windows at night, even though there's no electricity running through the structure anymore. Paranormal investigators claim to have recorded voices calling their names, and one group even captured what sounded like a woman sobbing, though not a single soul was inside at the time. Neighbors have reported seeing ghostly figures wandering the grounds, especially near the old treatment wing. Some believe these are the lost patients of the sanitarium, still pacing in confusion, never realizing their treatment ended decades ago. And then there's the legend of the doctor's hall, a long, shadowed corridor where one infamous physician was rumored to have experimented on patients in secret. People who walk down that hallway today describe sudden chills, a crushing feeling of dread, and an overwhelming urge to turn back before reaching the end. Would you dare to walk down Doctor's Hall alone? No flashlight, no phone, just you and the dark? Drop your answer in the comments. Number 9. Somerset Sanitarium, Somerset, Kentucky. In the quiet town of Somerset sits a building with a past most residents Don T. like to discuss, the old Somerset Sanitarium. Originally constructed in the early 20th century, it was intended to be a place of healing for those suffering from mental illness and long-term disease. But like so many institutions of its time, it quickly became a house of despair. Patients reported mistreatment, isolation, and experimental procedures that would never be allowed today. Many never checked out alive. And according to local lore, some still haven't. Visitors who've snuck into the ruins describe hearing heavy breathing in empty rooms, footsteps following close behind them, and sudden bursts of icy air that feel like someone brushing past. One chilling story comes from a group of paranormal investigators who claim they captured a shadow figure standing in a doorway, one that vanished the moment their flashlight beam hit it. The basement is said to be the most active spot of all. Witnesses report screams echoing from the dark, as if the walls themselves absorb the suffering of those locked away down there. Some even believe the sanitarium is a hotspot for poltergeist activity, with objects thrown across rooms and doors slamming violently with no explanation. For locals, Somerset Sanitarium isn't just an abandoned relic. It is a place you don't dare visit after sunset. So tell me, if someone offered you $1,000 to spend 1 hour alone in the basement of Somerset Sanitarium, would you take the deal? Type cash in if yes, or no chance if you'd never risk it. Number 8. Owensboro Hospital, Owensboro, Kentucky. On the surface, Owensboro is a quiet river town, but its old hospital carries a reputation that unsettles even lifelong locals. Built in the early 1900s, the original Owensboro Hospital saw countless patients pass through its doors, many of whom never made it back out. Between disease outbreaks, failed surgeries, and the sheer number of deaths, the building became a magnet for ghost stories that still linger today. Long after the hospital shut down, security guards and trespassers alike reported the same disturbing phenomena: lights flickering in rooms with no power, wheelchairs moving on their own, and the faint sound of gurneys rolling down empty hallways. But perhaps the most terrifying account comes from nurses who worked night shifts in the hospital's final years. They told stories of a woman in white who appeared in patient rooms, often just moments before someone died. Whether she was a hallucination of exhausted staff or a true harbinger of death, one thing is certain: the sightings were consistent, and they terrified those who saw her. Even now, the building is a hotspot for paranormal investigators, many of whom leave shaken, claiming they've seen shadowy figures pacing the upper floors, as if the hospital is still running. Only now, its patients are ghosts. If you were lying in a hospital bed and suddenly saw a ghostly woman in white standing at the foot of it, what would you do? Comment pray if you'd freeze, or run if you'd get out of there immediately. Number 7. Harrodsburg Tuberculosis Hospital, Harrodsburg, Kentucky. Not far from the rolling hills of Harrodsburg stands the ruins of a forgotten TB hospital, a place that once overflowed with the sick and dying during the height of America's tuberculosis epidemic. This sanatorium was built with hope, but within its walls, suffering and despair grew so thick that many believe the very foundation absorbed it. Locals say that even now the building seems to breathe. At night, pale lights flicker through its broken windows, and the faint sound of coughing echoes through the corridors. Paranormal investigators have reported strange mists forming in patient rooms, along with eerie EVP recordings of voices whispering, "Help me," and "I can't breathe." One of the most disturbing legends tied to Harrodsburg's hospital is the Death Tunnel, a sloping underground passageway used to discreetly transport bodies out of sight. Some say if you walk the tunnel in total silence, you'll hear footsteps pacing behind you, even though no one else is there. Others claim a shadowy figure lurks at the far end, watching, waiting. The building has been closed for decades, but thrill seekers still sneak inside. Many leave in a panic, swearing they felt hands brush against them in the dark or heard cries of pain coming from rooms long empty. Be honest, would you dare to walk the death tunnel alone in total silence just to see what happens? Drop your answer in the comments. Number 6. St. Joseph's Infirmary, Louisville, Kentucky. In the heart of Louisville once stood St. Joseph's Infirmary, a Catholic-run hospital that cared for thousands of patients throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. But while it was known as a place of healing, it also became the setting for countless tragedies: deaths from epidemics, failed surgeries, and patients who never left their beds alive. Today, the building is gone, but the hauntings remain tied to the land. Former staff, visitors, and even construction workers who later renovated the grounds claim to have seen shadowy nuns moving silently across hallways, vanishing the moment you blink. The most chilling stories come from the surgical ward, where screams were often heard echoing even after the infirmary was abandoned. Paranormal investigators have captured EVPs of prayers being whispered in Latin, as if desperate souls are still calling out for divine mercy. One urban legend even claims that late at night, the faint sound of surgical instruments clattering on trays can still be heard, though the operating theaters have been empty for nearly a century. If you suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and saw a ghostly nun standing at the foot of your bed, what's the first thing you'd do? Comment, pray if you'd call on faith, or run if you'd get out of there as fast as possible. Number 5. Louisville City Hospital, Louisville, Kentucky. Before it became the modern-day University of Louisville Hospital, the old Louisville City Hospital was a sprawling complex where thousands of patients were treated, and thousands more died. It was here that epidemics raged, experimental surgeries were performed, and countless lives ended in rooms where the walls still seemed to hum with energy. Nurses who worked the overnight shifts told stories of phantom patients, bedsheets shifting as if someone had just lain down, call lights blinking in empty rooms, and gurneys rolling down halls with no one pushing them. One nurse swore she heard a voice call out, "Help me," from an abandoned wing, only to find every door locked and the lights completely off. Visitors have reported ghostly figures wandering the corridors, some in tattered hospital gowns, others dressed in outdated uniforms from decades past. Paranormal investigators claim the most active spot is the old morgue, where the sound of drawers opening and closing still echoes in the dark. And then there's the legend of the death elevator, an old service lift that was said to move between floors on its own, stopping at random as if unseen passengers were still boarding. Would you dare ride the death elevator completely alone, in pitch darkness, just to see where it stops? Comment ride, if yes, or nope, if that gives you chills just thinking about it. Number 4. Bardstown Tuberculosis Sanatorium, Bardstown, Kentucky. Bardstown, Kentucky is often called the bourbon capital of the world. Tourists come here for distilleries, horse country, and southern charm. But hidden in the hills is a place very few outsiders talk about. A place where joy once turned to despair. The Bardstown Tuberculosis Sanatorium. When tuberculosis, the White Plague, was at its peak in the early 20th century, entire towns were devastated. Bardstown wasn't spared. The sanatorium was built on a hilltop, isolated from the community, where hundreds of patients were shipped away to either heal or die. And most never came back. The air here carried the sound of wheezing coughs, cries of pain, and the rattling breaths of patients who knew they would not live through the night. To keep morale up for those still alive, doctors and staff used what became known as the death tunnel. Every body, every mother, father, and child who lost their battle was carried underground through a sloping passage, pushed away in silence so the remaining patients wouldn't see the constant reminders of death. But the walls of that tunnel seem to have remembered. To this day, investigators claim the tunnel echoes with phantom gurney wheels and the shuffle of footsteps, even when it's completely empty. Some even swear they hear the faint metallic clatter of stretchers rolling into the darkness. Inside the main building, the atmosphere is no less chilling. The children's ward is notorious. People report hearing toys rolling across the cracked floors, faint giggles, and at times, soft crying that suddenly stops when you enter the room. Paranormal teams have captured shadow figures the size of children, darting across hallways, always just far enough away to keep you chasing them. One investigator claimed a small hand tugged at his coat, but when he spun around, he was completely alone. Even seasoned ghost hunters admit Bardstown Sanatorium carries a heaviness unlike anywhere else in Kentucky. The air feels dense, oppressive, as if the thousands who suffered there are still clinging desperately to the walls. Locals warn outsiders not to tempt fate. Don't go inside at night, they say. The sanatorium chooses who it lets back out. Let me ask you, if you were dared to spend the night in the Children S ward, with nothing but a flashlight and a recorder, would you accept? Type yes if you think you could face it, or no way if even the idea makes your skin crawl. Number 3. Highland Sanatorium, Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville seems to be cursed with hospitals that refuse to let their dead rest. Just south of the city, overlooking the Ohio River, sits the decaying shell of the Highland Sanatorium. Built in the early 1900s, it was a towering fortress of brick, designed to treat the flood of tuberculosis patients who came through its doors. Back then, TB wasn't just a disease, it was a death sentence, and the Highland quickly became a warehouse of the doomed. Inside its long wards, rows of beds stretched wall to wall. At night, the sound of hacking coughs, labored breathing, and the chilling silence that followed a patient's last breath echoed through the halls. Doctors tried experimental treatments, ultraviolet light, collapsing infected lungs, even removing ribs in desperate attempts to give patients a chance. Most didn't survive. It's said that on some days, dozens of bodies were carried out. And just like Bardstown, Highland had its own system of body disposal, a hidden tunnel leading down to the riverbanks. The dead were wheeled out under cover of night, never to be seen again. Locals call it the death chute, and even now, trespassers claim they hear gurney wheels squealing along the old tracks, followed by whispers that seem to rise out of the damp earth itself. Ghost hunters who've explored Highland describe overwhelming sensations of sadness and dread. In the surgical ward, investigators recorded screams, raw, agonizing wails that sent chills down their spines. Others have reported shadowy figures standing at the ends of hallways, vanishing the second you shine a light. But the most unsettling stories come from those who linger in the children's wing. Many visitors say they've heard faint laughter, toys being dragged across the floor, and even the sound of small feet running across cracked tiles. One investigator swore she felt a child's hand slip into hers, but when she looked down, nothing was there. Highland Sanatorium is a place where the line between past and present feels razor thin. Walk through its halls, and it's as if the building itself is alive, replaying the suffering that once consumed it. Some even say the sanatorium feeds on fear, that the longer you stay, the more you feel it closing in around you, urging you to join the voices that never left. If someone offered you the chance to walk Highland Sanatorium's death tunnel at midnight, would you do it? Comment, tunnel walk if yes, or no way if you turn back before even stepping inside. Number 2, Kentucky State Penitentiary Hospital, Eddyville, Kentucky. They call it the Castle on the Cumberland. Rising from the banks of the Cumberland River, the Kentucky State Penitentiary looks like something out of a Gothic nightmare. Stone towers, looming gates, and a history steeped in violence. But what most people don't realize is that hidden inside this fortress is a hospital wing that has long been considered one of the most haunted places in the state. The prison opened in the late 1800s, and from the very beginning, the hospital overflowed with death. Inmates were brought here after riots, after violent attacks, after executions gone wrong. Some came in sick with disease, chained to their beds. Others were carried in broken, bleeding, beyond repair. Most never left alive. The hospital wasn't a place of healing. It was a warehouse of suffering. Nurses and guards whispered about strange happenings. In the morgue, drawers would slam shut by themselves. The faint sound of clanking chains echoed through empty hallways. Some swore they heard screams, not from the living inmates, but from the spirits of those long dead. One of the most disturbing legends comes from the execution chamber. Prisoners who were hanged or electrocuted were often taken directly to the hospital for processing. Staff claimed that long after the executions, they would see shadowy figures pacing near the hospital wing, heads slumped, the smell of burning lingering in the air. Some even said the cries of the condemned echoed through the infirmary walls at night, like a loop that never ends. Modern paranormal teams who've investigated the penitentiary hospital report overwhelming dread. EMF meters spike uncontrollably. Batteries drain instantly. In the infirmary rooms, investigators have recorded chilling EVPs, whispers saying, "Help me," or "Get out." And in the old operating theater, some claim to have seen a man in prison stripes standing in the corner, only to vanish when approached. But perhaps the most terrifying experiences come from the guards. Many reported refusing to patrol the hospital alone at night. They'd hear footsteps following them down the long, echoing hallways. Doors creaked open with no one inside. Cold spots hit suddenly, like walking straight through an invisible wall of ice. Some guards even quit their jobs, saying the hospital was worse than the cell blocks, because at least in the cell blocks, you knew who you were dealing with. Even today, the Kentucky State Penitentiary Hospital is rarely spoken of publicly. Locals say it's cursed ground, soaked in too much suffering, too much blood, too much unfinished business. And those who worked there swear, once you've walked its halls, you never forget the feeling of being watched by eyes you can't see. Comment, lock me in, if yes, or no thanks, if you'd rather throw those keys straight into the river. Number 1. Waverly Hills Sanatorium, Louisville, Kentucky. Some places are rumored to be haunted, others are built out of death itself. And then there is Waverly Hills Sanatorium, a place so soaked in tragedy, so drenched in suffering, that to step inside is to breathe in the ghost of every soul that ever died here. Let's go back to the early 1900s. Tuberculosis was raging like wildfire. Doctors didn't fully understand it, and treatments were primitive at best, barbaric at worst. In 1910, Waverly opened its doors to those infected, offering them isolation high above Louisville, where the air was thought to be cleaner. But clean is the last word anyone would use to describe what happened inside. At its peak, Waverly housed over 400 patients. Imagine the endless chorus of coughing, choking, and crying. Whole families were destroyed. Some patients lived their final months strapped to hospital beds, staring at ceilings, waiting for their last breath. Treatments were gruesome, collapsing lungs with air, removing ribs to make room for the lungs, or inserting balloons into chests in a desperate experiment. These weren't cures, they were slow-motion torture sessions. And when the patients inevitably died, their bodies were wheeled not through the main hallways, but down the infamous body chute, a sloping pitch-black tunnel where corpses slid on carts into waiting hearses. The hospital didn't want the living patients to lose hope by seeing how many died daily, so the dead were hidden away. Some say you can still hear the squeak of those corpse carts echoing down the chute if you dare to go inside. Estimates vary, but some claim over 60,000 souls died at Waverly. 60,000. That's not just a hospital. That's a graveyard disguised as a building. And their ghosts, they never left. Let's start with the 5th floor, specifically room 502. In 1928, a nurse was found hanging from a light fixture in that room. Some say it was suicide. Others whisper she was murdered to cover up a scandalous pregnancy with a doctor. Years later, another nurse supposedly leapt from the very same room's window, falling to her death. Visitors today describe being choked by invisible hands in 502, or seeing the shadow of a woman swinging from the ceiling when they turn their flashlight beams across the darkness. Then there is Timmy, the spirit of a little boy who still plays in the halls. Ghost hunters often bring balls for him, and more than one has seen those toys roll on their own, even when the floor is perfectly flat. A team once set a ball down in front of their camera. It didn't just roll, it stopped, shifted directions, and rolled back toward them. The body chute is another nightmare entirely. Paranormal investigators who've dared to go inside claim to hear whispers, footsteps behind them, and the unmistakable sensation of hands shoving them forward. One woman reported being grabbed so forcefully she was left with bruises shaped like fingers on her arm. She was alone. And then there are the shadow people. Visitors describe entire human-shaped silhouettes darting across doorways or standing motionless at the end of a hallway before vanishing when approached. Some claim the shadows here aren't a T-human at all. One particularly infamous entity is described as a towering figure with no face and twisted limbs, said to stalk the halls after dark. But perhaps the scariest accounts are the ones you'll never see on TV. The stories whispered by locals who broke in when the hospital sat abandoned. One man swears that while exploring the 3rd floor with friends, he heard the sound of children laughing, not faint, right next to his ear. His flashlight flickered, and in that second of darkness, he felt a hand grab his wrist. When the light returned, he saw nothing, but the pressure remained. He bolted, dragging his friends with him, and claims he didn't stop running until he reached his car. For weeks afterward, he said he woke up every night at 3:15 a.m. to the sound of coughing in his bedroom. Another story tells of a paranormal investigator who spent the night in Waverly alone. He set up cameras on the 5th floor, then sat down in the hallway to record EVP sessions. On playback, he asked, "Is anyone here with me?" The response, clear as day, was a woman's voice whispering, "You shouldn't be." Hours later, his footage captured his own camera being knocked to the ground while he was asleep. The next morning, he left and never returned. And then there are those who say Waverly does not just have ghosts. It has something darker, a presence that feeds on the fear of visitors. Paranormal teams have reported being scratched, shoved, even momentarily possessed, screaming uncontrollably before snapping back to themselves with no memory of what happened. One priest who blessed the building described it as a house of pain, thick with evil. Even today, Waverly Hills is open for tours and ghost hunts. Thousands visit every year, chasing the thrill of the unknown. Some leave with nothing but goosebumps. Others leave convinced they've met the dead. But I'll leave you with this. If you were locked inside Waverly Hills for just one night, would you explore room 502? Would you walk the body chute alone? Or would you sit frozen, praying that the darkness didn't reach for you? Comment below. I'd face Waverly if you're brave enough to enter, or not a chance if just hearing this story is enough. That's the 15 most haunted hospitals in Kentucky. But tell me, which one chilled you the most? And do you think Waverly Hills deserves its crown as the most haunted hospital in the world? Don't forget, like this video, subscribe for more haunted deep dives, and hit that bell so you never miss the next terrifying story.